In 2004, at the end of 2004, I found myself in a place I never imagined I'd be. In the blistering heat and humidity of the south of Thailand, surrounded by flies and the stench of death, walking through fields filled with bodies, trying to find something of value to offer into that horrible, chaotic mess. We had just been rocked the day before by a giant tsunami. I'll never forget it. Rewind 5 years, and I was walking downtown Ottawa, down a street. I had a good high-tech gig going on. It was Christmas time. There was a winter chill in the air. I probably had about half my mind on my work for that day and half on my beautiful baby girl waiting for me back home. How, in such a few years, did I find myself in such a different place? Well, it's a long story, and I'd be happy to go for coffee with any of you and tell you. But for tonight, let me just say, I was made aware of a need that broke my heart, and I decided to do something about it. In the work that we now do and have for 13 years on the Thai and Myanmar border, I have encountered some of the saddest situations of abuse, families surviving on garbage dumps, people's lives ripped apart by predators and traffickers, and even choices parents have made to give away or even sell their children. I have sat with, eaten with, and tried to console victims. And with others, honestly, I've just cried without any idea of what to do. I want to tell you about how passionate I am for this. I am passionate to see people lifted out of poverty. I am passionate about seeing them brought to the place where they have a sense of dignity and they're no longer dependent on handouts. I am also a firm believer in the power of giving to change us, the giver, to release us from these small worlds of consumption that we live in and redeem our society's soul. That's why I bring to you today this message. Please stop giving to charity. Let me try that one more time. Please stop giving to bad charity. Why do I find myself lately telling as many people to stop giving to charity or to take a really good look at what it is that they're giving to, as I'm telling others to get off their butts and get generous? Well, I'll tell you, I have seen the damage that good hearts, big checks, and bad ideas can visit on the poor. Our experiences overseas, so that's where I want to take us today to look at some of these areas. So, first of all, don't give to charity if the charity implements and sells you on ideas that we have already rejected for ourselves. Okay. Another big topic, I want to focus on one that's very widespread, and as a dad, honestly breaks my heart. So I want everyone here to close your eyes. Not scary. At the very least, it's your first nap of the day. I want you to picture your children, if you have children, and at an age where they're innocent, 4 or 5 years old, life is ahead of them, there's a joy in their step. Now, if something were to have happened tragically to you or your spouse or your partner, that you were not able to take care of them, what would you do? Where would they go? How would they feel? Would it ever enter your mind to sign them over to the state and watch them be led off and institutionalized? Well, we have done this, just not with our children, and not too long ago. You can open your eyes now. Australia's stolen generation, Britain's lost children, and as we've heard, Canada's residential schools. Through children, innocent children, we harmed whole cultures and communities in ways that will take many, many generations to heal. Well, but at least that was the past. We've learned from our mistakes, haven't we? Have we? Today, individuals, charities, churches, and even volunteer tourism will pour money into the exact same sorts of things, whether they're called orphanages, children's homes, residents. In developing nations, we are harming children when we know better. I remember the first time that we took our team in to do assessments in orphanages overseas. We have social workers that do this. And what we found, time and time again, were little kids filling rows of bunks telling us how much they missed their families. Yes, their families. Nearly 80% of the children that we encountered had families that they could be living with, and yet they were in residential care. I remember this one little girl. She was about 6 years old, about the same age as I had a daughter, 6 at the same time. What she told us was what made her most sad is that when she was sick, her mommy wasn't there to comfort her. Her mom lived maybe 2 villages over, but she would rarely see her. What we found is this is commonplace all over the developing world. Children as young as 3 to 4 years old who could be living at home, stuck in residential care. And believe me, I've heard all the excuses from founders, funders, directors on why these things exist. Well, these children are from very poor families. We need to help them. Or there's no adequate education in their villages. We need to bring them here. Or, well, if we have them here, we can bring them to church and teach them about God more easily. You know what? These should sound very familiar to any of us who are familiar with our own dark history. I even found there was one American funder who told me when I met him over there at one of these orphanages, who said, if we don't have these children here, all of them will be sex slaves. And I looked at him and I said, really? All 300? He was misinformed on this. It was absolutely untrue, but it sure makes a good fundraising line, doesn't it? There are cases, of course, and we'll deal with these regularly, where children are not able to cope in their situations. There's abuse, active abuse and neglect going on, and there are temporary times where we need to intervene and come in, but this should only be temporary. Resident care should be the absolute last option after everything else is explored. And then, even then, it should be temporary. Children should be with their families, in their communities, within their cultures, not taken out. There was one lady I remember that came to our organization and brought her little baby. This is the first time it happened many times after. Cutest little thing. And she said, I want you to take my baby. And our staff have been trained in how to deal with this and how in family preservation and how to help people in communities, in their cultures. And so she simply asked this lady a question. Don't you love your baby? The lady was taken aback, and then she burst into tears. The answer was obvious. She followed it with a second question. And this is a question that most of the orphanages that I've known would not ask. They would book the child in. She said, what can we do to help you raise your child? Sometimes all mom needs is a little help that week, a little respite care, a little help with food. Perhaps there's something going on in the home that needs some sort of counseling or care, or maybe there's a resource that she has access to that she doesn't even know. Just because a family is a poor family doesn't mean it's a bad family and that they can't raise their kids on their own. Okay, second thing, don't give to charity when the charity caters to donors at the expense of effective, sustainable transformation or at the cost of human dignity. We know now that throwing stuff at problems only perpetuates poverty. It makes the problem bigger. Whether it's in the macro, decimation of whole industries across Africa, when we thought we were being generous and being good, rather than opening up business opportunities for Africans, we threw a bunch of stuff in and patted ourselves on the back, and we wrecked things for them. Or a small noodle shop in Asia who's forced out of business and can't feed his family because we've done charitable food deliveries. I remember 2013, I had a charity director come to me with a really interesting problem. He said, we have a huge container full of stuff sitting in the port in Bangkok, but we can't afford the import fees. The story goes something like this. A group in Australia had wanted to help poor children. They wanted to send some stuff for them. So things like, what do we have here? Toothpaste, and toothbrushes, soap. That would be good. When the director tried to explain to him that everything that they wanted to send, a cute little toy, was already readily available locally and at a fraction of the cost, well, the donor pushed back. He said, simply sending a check, even though you've told me that this would be more helpful to empower local things and local initiatives, wouldn't give us the type of experience that we're looking for when we give. It wouldn't give them the type of experience that they were looking for. As far as I know, that container is still stuck somewhere in the port in Bangkok. Dumb, right? Well, I don't know if this has seemed familiar to some of you here as I've been packing this. This year, families across Canada, the US, and other wealthy nations will collect enough stuff going out to stores like Walmart, Toys R Us, Costco, Shoppers Drug Mart to fill a small box. These boxes will be collected, put into shipping containers, and sent to poor children overseas. If the children happen to open the box and were curious enough to look, they might see that half the stuff in this box was actually manufactured in their country or a country next door at a fraction of the cost that the happy Canadian packer paid for it. If they happen to have an uncle who sells the same sort of stuff in a small shop next door to feed his family, they might also hear how it's impacted him. In 2015, one organization, one program alone, claims to have sent over 10 million boxes from wealthy families to poor families. 10 million. I'm sure the Canadian packers felt that they'd done a really good charitable deed and had actually been able to have fun with it and teach their children about good charity. I don't even know where to get started on this, which angle to take. There's so many. We're businessy people here. Let's do the math, okay? Say a box like this costs $25 to fill. Not the shipping, not the salaries, not all of the other things, the marketing that goes into running this massive program, just the stuff. That's effectively $250 million, $250 million that rich nations have diverted from poor nations' economies. They get our stuff, and we get to keep the money. Now that's a great trade deal. That's just one organization. There are countless groups sending anything from soap to shoes to even used milk bags overseas. Now, I understand that my grasp of economics is probably quite limited, and there may be some economists squirming in your seats. The main point I want to make is this, that if we are truly committed to eradicating poverty like we say we are, and really being responsible citizens, stuff is going in the wrong direction. Another big point I want to add on to this is the problem of perpetuating wrong thinking. That stuff fixes problems, that we are necessary saviors, and that people in developing nations are helpless without us. Okay, I did not come here to bash charities. I love charities, I work with charities, I even run a charity. So, it's always easy though to point a finger, isn't it? It's fun. Well, what are you doing? When you're pointing one finger that way, what's happening? 3 fingers pointing right back at you. Is it possible that we, the donors, are the root of this problem? It is hard to do charity. My friend Mark reminds me, he says, well, Allan, you know, it's the golden rule. He who has the gold gets to make the rules. And very much so for charities. Charities are always under budget, under pressure, under massive scrutiny, not only to do what is good for the people on the ground, but also to dance to the secondary tune, trying to capture your attention, trying to make you feel good by offering you things. Maybe a trip to build a family a home in Mexico. What do you think that does to the local industry? Maybe to go and visit your child in an orphanage, or have your company's logo or plaque put on an orphanage wall. None of these things actually contribute to the programs. They're at very least distracting, and at times can be downright damaging. So, how can we be good donors? You know the first thing? Get really, really generous. We've been going downhill, Canada, for the last 10 years on our generosity. Don't be scared to be generous. However, look into what you are contributing to. What are they doing on the ground? Are they actually coming alongside communities and families to empower, to lift them to a place of dignity and pride and hope for the future? Or are they perpetuating poverty in a way that creates its ongoing dependency on us? One of the acid tests that I like to say is, if the tables were flipped and my children were on the other side of this, would I want them receiving this program? Maybe you have a blank thing, like, how am I supposed to know this? Well, there's ways to find out, if you really want to. There's things you can read. There's things that you can look at. There's people you can ask to say, is this what we want to contribute? Anything else we invest in life, whether it's the next car or the tires for it or our retirement savings, we ask for input. How much more important when we're impacting potentially multiple generations of vulnerable children, their communities and their families? We need to look into it. It may also, in looking into it, be the very thing that makes you aware of a need that will break your heart and lead you into an amazing next adventure, like it did for me. As we enter into this next 150 years as a generous, giving nation, let's get really, really generous. But let's be charity wise. Let's make sure that we're being wise, even picky, to be a part of what works, not what hurts. Thank you.